Hello people of the internet, it's Amanda, and if you're new here on my channel, I usually talk about Japanese movies, dramas, entertainment. Sometimes I tap into other Asian pop culture topics as well. And for today's video, I'm here to talk about a Netflix series that I was looking forward to for so long. I've seen the trailer of this. I'm such a sucker for like really dramatic romance dramas and movies, bittersweet tones, not exactly happy endings and that sort of thing. And even if I know that this will have kind of like a predictable narrative, I was still looking forward to it. I love the main cast lineup. And the screenwriter for this, who is Okada Yoshikazu. I love his treatment when it comes to some of like movies and dramas that I've seen in the past, like Necha no Koibito, Ima Ai ni Yukimasu, If Cats Disappeared from the World, those types of things. So again, within kind of like that same genre of romance, but it's bittersweet. There's a lot of like raw emotions involved in the narrative, stuff like that. So I was just really looking forward to this. I'm talking about Beyond Goodbye, or Sayonara No Tsuzuki, which stars Sakaguchi Kentaro, Arimura Kasumi, Ikuta Toma, and Nakamura Yuri. Now, before I actually talk about the plot and just my full review of this series, I I absolutely love, like, I think I've talked about this here on this channel before, but not often enough. Like, at the moment, my Oshi is Hiranosho. He's been my Oshi for almost 7 years now. But prior to that, my favorite Japanese actor is Ikuta Toma. I love him. Back when I was a teenager, I saw Hanakimi, and ever since, I really appreciated that he wasn't like an idol, but he was full on like an actor, doing different projects from comedy to theater to drama to mystery suspense. I've seen a ton of his films, and I absolutely, like, I haven't seen more of his recent stuff. I think the last that I've seen him in would be, I completely forgot the title, but it was the one where he was a writer, and he was having writer's block. I forgot the title of that drama, but I think that was the last that I've seen him in, and also like his documentaries on Netflix about doing theater and stuff like that. But he's like, I think he was my favorite for at least 10 years or so before I became a fan of Hiranosho in 2018. So it was crazy just looking back at that and watching him again in this particular series, especially since it's on Netflix. I like Sakaguchi Kentaro. I know that a lot of people are like got curious about this drama because they were just coming off of his recent project, like the Japan-Korea collab project that I keep forgetting the title, but I'm also meant to watch that one. Then Arimura Kasumi, I really like her. I know that a lot of people have mixed feelings about her, but personally for me, I like her. I like her, some of her projects. My dad absolutely loves her as well. Like, I think he watches dramas whenever she's in it. And then Nakamura Yuri, I also really love. I love her especially when she does like really badass roles. I think her most recent work that I've seen is not really, was it Kurosagi? She's also in Watado, but kind of like a supporting role. But as you know, like, I did recaps for Kurosagi starring Hiranosho before, and she's also there. But I also love her because, I don't know, like, I love most of her roles. Like, she really has this kind of like badass vibe to her, but at the same time, like, she can also do softer roles similar to this series. So I don't know, I just love that cast lineup. And again, as I mentioned, like, I'm just really looking forward to it because I really love kind of like dramatic narratives where it's like each and every character is just gonna be in pain and there's gonna be a lot of like crying and yearning and stuff like that. I just love those types of narratives. And so when I saw the trailer for this, I already knew it was gonna be predictable. So basically, it's about a couple. One of them dies, and then his heart is transplanted to another person, and the other person starts, like getting all his memories, all those things. I'll recap this a little bit better in a bit, but just to give you an insight, it's a pretty kind of like predictable plot in a sense, but I was still seated for it. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. So without further ado, let's just get to it. So to give you a proper recap as compared to what I did earlier, the plot is basically about this couple. Yusuke, who is played by Ikuta Toma, and Saeko, played by Arimura Kasumi. They were on a bus, and they're traveling towards a mountain. It was snowing, it was beautiful, and apparently Yusuke has plans to propose once they reach a mountain, but while they were still in the bus, he accidentally kind of like talks about it, so it wasn't a surprise anymore. His friends is waiting on the other side of the track, just preparing fireworks for the both of them, so he kind of like texts them immediately, and they were watching the fireworks. Him and Saeko were watching the fireworks from the bus stop, from the bus, and it was such a beautiful moment. Like, you can really see that this is a young couple. They're very much in love, and you kind of like establish their personalities right off the bat. Yusuke is the type who is a bit more of like happy-go-lucky. He describes himself as a softener because he feels like his role in terms of the people that he's with is to allow them to relax and just see life as the beauty that it is and take it chill, take it slow. That's kind of like his entire personality. He always kind of like finds beauty and joy even in the smallest things. Whereas for Saeko, she yearns for, she has this kind of like very methodical approach to how she does the things as well. She's not exactly kind of like very strict and very what do you call this, like she's not exactly someone who closes herself off of people, but in the relationship she sees Yusuke as this person who really brings a lot of life into her life. And it's just like a very, they're just very happy together. Like, that was the vibe, at least for the first couple of minutes before the tragedy happens, where there's kind of like a snow avalanche and it throws them off the bus. And I absolutely love the shot that they did with that, like them being thrown off the bus. It was such like a beautiful slow-mo moment. I know that it's not a beautiful kind of like moment or scene in that but it was just shot in this very kind of like creative slow-mo manner, focusing that at the last moment Yusuke hugs Saeko, and it was his final attempt to kind of like protect her from what's happening. And then they get rescued, but Yusuke doesn't make it, and his heart is transplanted onto this other character called Kazu, Naruse, played by Sakaguchi Kentaro. Now, Naruse is married, so Naruse is his surname, but they kind of like use it more as compared to Kazuma in the story, because his first name is Kazumasa. But anyways, so Naruse, he's married to the character of Nakamura Yuri, whose name is Miki. Their family, he works at the school. She and her family has an apple farm, and it was shown later on that they're also in a very kind of like loving relationship as a couple, but obviously because of his health, he's kind of like resigned to the idea that his heart is failing and that he probably wouldn't live long. But then this happens, and like Yusuke's heart is transplanted to Naruse. Now fast forward to whatever, and we see Saeko trying to live her life, and she was just like trying to get on with the pace and stuff like that. We never really see her kind of like crying and breaking down and all these other things. But I think what I like about this is that it kind of like shows how different people kind of like process grief. And I'm kind of like, the idea of grief is very personal to me in a sense that I also don't handle it really well. But there's this other character, Kengo, who is Yusuke's best friend. They run a cafe together. And with Kengo, he's a lot more, he's a type of person who's just very quiet, very reserved, but at the same time, like, he gets extremely emotional with Yusuke. And you can clearly see how much he loves his friend. There's a little bit more of like a side story to that at the end of the narrative, but obviously it's kind of like him and Saeko are processing their grief in like two different ways. Like with Saeko, she's just trying to get by, but in every single thing that happens, she still remembers Yusuke. And I've seen some comments about, like people saying that, never really saw Saeko kind of like grieving for Yusuke. She immediately gets drawn to this other person who exhibits similar characters like Yusuke, who is Naruse, but that's like a discussion for a later time. But to me, grief can also manifest in such a manner that you don't necessarily have to show grief in the sense that you're just always breaking down and crying about that person. Grief can also be like that, where you see that person in almost every single thing that happens around you. And I think that's what Saiko's process was. And that's why it was so easy for her that when she meets Naruse in when the train broke down and they kind of like started talking to Naruse, she kind of like sees Yusuke immediately in him. And it's not just because, it's an easy manifestation of Naruse starts exhibiting behaviors and memories of Yusuke that changed him a little bit, but it was more of like the manner of that's just how it is. Like, it was understandable that Saeko was easily picked up on that because she was grieving. It was so easy for her to notice this person who exhibits very similar attributes to the person that she lost. And it doesn't make her cry, but it makes her excited because, again, that's also part of her grieving process. And I think that's completely fine. I do understand why there's a lot of people who found some issues with that, but to me personally, like, I think it makes sense for this story. Now the narrative style kind of like is going back and forth between different timelines, showing us bits and pieces of Yusuke and Saiko's relationship, and sometimes the relationship of Miki and Naruse as well. However, throughout the story, we kind of like start developing this friendship between Naruse and Saeko, especially when Saeko and Naruse himself realizes their connection and their relationship, that Naruse was the one who received Yusuke's heart. And as expected, there are some cheating undertones to it. Obviously, Naruse is married. I honestly feel so much for Miki's character. And I feel like the issue with the series is, even if like we have flashbacks of Saeko and Yusuke's relationship, and also flashbacks of Miki and Naruse's relationship, there it wasn't balanced enough, and I get that because the story is about Naruse, Yusuke, and Saeko, but I feel like because Miki's character is kind of like put more at the back burner of the story, we don't see just how much her suffering is also valid in this situation, in a sense that she is married the person that she was willing to, like, that she poured her heart out, even if she knows that he has a condition, was finally healthy. But then once he was healthy, he wasn't like, his heart, quite literally and metaphorically, wasn't completely with her. I think it could have made the story a little bit better because, again, she was put in the back burner and we were more focused on building up this kind of like very confusing, definitely problematic relationship between Naruse and also Saeko. But I feel like if they could have built the relationship of Miki and Naruse a lot more, then it would have had a little bit more impact into the narrative. But I feel so much for her character, especially when she was confronting Saeko, telling her that, you know, it would have been easier if it was an affair. But no, because the idea was that there's no solid scientific explanation for it yet, but there are some transplant donors or receivers who actually manifest or claim to feel or manifest certain characteristics and attributes of the person, of their original donor, something like that. And I've looked it up before. I've had like a homework back when I was in high school, about stuff. I'm just kind of like a nerd, but it's a science homework. We're talking about time travel, and I was thinking of like how to make time travel plausible in a more scientific sense in the context of something. And I ended up doing research about cellular memory and how there is a possibility that memories are transferred through the cells and not just within the brain. And so that's kind of like reasons why sometimes we have deja vu or whatever. But again, these are all theories and not completely like scientifically proven. But there are some accounts in real life where people actually talk about, you know, somehow feeling differently or having not as vivid as what the drama presents, but having these kind of like vague moments of sharing something with their previous donors, something like that. So again, completely nerdy sidetrack moment right there. But again, like, the premise of the film banks on the idea that Yusuke's memories is still very much intact, and that's the reason why Naruse himself is very much confused if he was the one feeling this for Saeko or if this is Yusuke who was yearning for Saeko. And Saeko also feels the same, like she doesn't know if the person that she likes is actually Naruse, or is it because he's exhibiting a lot of the traits of Yusuke, and she knows that Yusuke's heart is within him. So that's the main kind of like conflict of the story. It ends on a bittersweet note again, which I highly appreciate, but it makes me really sad. But what I liked about it is around the end of it, when Naruse was playing the piano, and he kind of like stops midway, and there's just something about both the expression of Sakaguchi Kentaro and Arimura Kasumi where it kind of like clicked between the two of them, that in the middle of that entire situation, Yusuke's memories stopped flowing in that particular moment. Like, that was the closure that each of them needed. It was such a creative way of doing it without necessarily saying anything. Like, for me, that's how it felt. Because, you know, like, it was in the middle of a piece that Yusuke is always playing, and Naruse claims that he's never played a piano before, but for some reason he was able to. And when he was able to deliver that kind of message of what Yusuke was feeling the first time that he saw Saeko, and the reason why he wanted to approach her, when that came across and that moment happened, there was such a clear line in getting across the message of this was the closure that both of them needed. And then when Naruse came home to Miki, his expression was also completely changed, in a sense that he's finally remembering that the person that Naruse himself loves is his wife, not exactly Saeko. And there's a lot of nuances in that small sequence alone that I myself as a viewer has seen. I'm not sure if it came across that way to other viewers as well, but to me, that particular set of scenes said so much about the plot that I wish that they really built Naruse and Miki's love story a lot more as well, because then we could have felt Naruse's struggle a lot more when it comes to feeling the way that he felt with Saeko versus what he was feeling with Miki. I think that was what the series is lacking. Now, my thoughts. Did I love it? I absolutely appreciated and loved the series. I did think that given the stuff that I mentioned earlier, it has some of its flaws. And again, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of like dramas with cheating undertones. Although, again, as I said, given the general premise of it, I was expecting it in this type of story. And I'm not saying that I liked it, but I kind of like get it. And I'm not a huge fan of it. And I like that they kind of like did something to kind of like negate that concept. And again, it opens up this kind of like philosophical idea of what constitutes a person. Is it his consciousness, his memories, or is it him, this physical self? Like, if his memories and his consciousness still exist, but his physical body is no longer there, then does he still, like, all those other things. It's one of my favorite topics in philosophy back when I was still in university. One of my favorite kind of like discussions. And these types of dramas, they kind of like put forward that kind of like ethical and moral and just very human conflict in a creative form. And you don't have to overthink it to just see how straightforward the story is and the struggles of these characters. And again, I wish that Kei could have done more with Miki's character as they have done with Yusuke, because I feel like we've really gotten a sense of Yusuke as a character through the scenes, even if he's not exactly, like, even if it's just through flashbacks. I absolutely love I don't know, like I absolutely love Yusuke's character, not just because he's being played by Toma, but there's just some people who are like sunshine, and that's what Yusuke is to the people around him. I absolutely feel for Kengo so much. Like, all of the scenes with Kengo, Yusuke's best friend, it's just such a delight to watch. It's very, I think, with Kengo and with Miki, there's a lot of opportunity there that they could have fleshed out a little bit better, because they were also kind of like the hearts of other perspectives of the narrative. But again, with the focus being so much on Saeko and Naruse having this confusing relationship, and also like the presence of Yusuke, the story focused too much on that. And with 8 episodes, I feel like we could have really fleshed out like these 2 other characters as well, and seeing, you know, Kengo and why he was grieving the way that he did, because he was friends with Yusuke even before Yusuke met Saeko. And then with Miki, again, her struggles of, you know, being a wife who's so much in love with her husband and who saw like a second chance and opportunity to be happy with him, but seeing that he's changed as a person and he feels like he's yearning for someone else because of circumstances. They could have done so much with these other characters as well, because sometimes I feel like there are a lot of moments with Saeko and Naruse that was really pushing for this will they won't they type of thing. Will they cheat? Will they not cross that line stuff? And it became a little bit too much. But overall, just generally as a whole, it was a good series. Like, it was fine. I would say I didn't kind of like feel like any scenes I would have to like fast forward to. Would I rewatch it? Probably. But these are kind of like just my thoughts in terms of seeing these other characters and feeling more for them as compared to how much I felt with like Saeko and kind of like Naruse. One thing that I feel like the series also didn't explore, which I was kind of like expecting, and I'm not sure yet if it's a good or a bad thing, is with Yusuke, he's always kind of like this flashback thing. Like usually with these types, right, you get some closure with the character kind of like pushing through this persona that they're showing. But they never really did that. So it was really more of a question of, was fate really about Yusuke and Saeko, or was it about Naruse and Saeko in the first place? Because they've met before the transplant, and Naruse and that short memory that they completely forgot early until later on was between Saeko, Naruse, and Yusuke when Yusuke was still alive. That kind of like triggered Naruse wanting to get the operation and surgery. So it also makes you wonder, like, was it really about Yusuke and Saeko, or was it about this thing that really connects Naruse and Saeko in the first place? So there's a lot of those things, and even up until the end, I feel like that wasn't clear in a sense. Like, was it Yusuke's heart that was connecting both of them, or they keep on talking about faith, about destiny in this narrative? And yeah, so I feel like, again, there's just so much of that, and I'm not sure if I'm just kind of like overthinking it, looking at it that way. But if you're just watching it, probably looking for something that would make you cry a little bit or whatever, this is it. It's a good watch. The performances were really good, and even if there's a hint of predictability to it, given again the plot, there are some things in it that still feels like heartwarming and whatever in a sense. And yeah, and again, it's really more of a question of who really was who really was the kind of like the centerpiece of the story. But yeah, so but overall, like, it was fine, and it made me like love Toma again. But yeah, so if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Tell me all of your thoughts down in comments below, whether or not you're watching it or whatever. If you have any other recommendations that you'd like me to watch, I would very much appreciate it. If you're new here on my channel and you would want to hear more from me, please hit subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you again soon in a new one. Bye!